How's it going, and welcome to No Fun Alloved's guide series on Waterdeep Dragon Heist, a 5th edition module. In today's video, we'll be diving into the Vault of Dragons itself. We are going after the gold. Of course, there is going to be a ton of spoilers, so players do not watch this, but DMs that want that added insight, go ahead and stick around because we have a lot to cover. And here it is, the Vault of Dragons, or at least it's the door to the Vault of Dragons. It's not that easy, people. After your players have attuned to the Stone of Galore, they find wherever the Vault of Dragons is located at, depending on which season you take up. They go down the stairs, which no matter what season it is a long way down a set of stairs, and then your players are going to see this door. So the important thing to note is, of course, they get to the vault door and you can show them a cool art, but the thing that is really important here is the keys. They are going to need 3 keys in order to open up that door. These keys are a nice little laundry list of things here. You can choose to roll it out however you desire, or you can say whichever one's coolest. No matter what, though, I'm going to tell you, you want every single one of those keys to be an awesome adventure to get. Let's say, for example, I roll... They need to find an invisible creature, and they need a bronze dragon scale. Oh, and they also need a unicorn. Right there, that's already telling me an awesome set of adventures, whether they be one-shots or little mini adventure, whatever the case may be. Those are going to be fun experiences to go after. And the cool part about this whole thing is, not only do your players need to get these items, but they also need to make sure that no one else catches them on the act. Every single one of these keys can be found in Waterdeep. If the characters don't already know the location of a key, they can gather the information by making a DC 15 investigation check, and every day they're spending 5 GP researching this thing. Now, if they fail, that's fine. If they roll an 11 through 14, then hey, they just gotta search for another day. But if they roll a 10 or less, then the main villain figures out where they're at, and then is going to send in the goons. And we get a nice little laundry list here of what goons are sent to chase after the PCs. But the important thing to note is, I personally think that just spending time in game and a whole bunch of gold, I think it's a little bit more boring. What I personally would recommend is every single one of the keys, you have an amazing little fun side quest to go behind it, right? And the cool thing to note is, your players might not necessarily need to investigate, right? If your players get told, for example, they need to find a beholder eye stock, then your players might already have some ideas. If they've seen some gazers floating around, if they went to old Zoblob shop, if they actually plan on going into the Xanathar's lair itself, then already right there, they've already got some ideas. Another example being a drunken elf. Hey, if there's an elf in the party, then let's get him liquored up. Easy peasy. Some of these things just don't need an investigation check tied behind it, and I personally recommend that you don't have one. I think that there should be some fun story tied behind it. Your players should search around to themselves manually, talking to NPCs that they know, and just interacting with the city. Some of the big ones here, for example, being the Severed Drowhand. If they're going up against the Brigand Dareth all the time, and they're not grisly, creepy people, then they have to think to themselves, oh great, we gotta get a Drowhand. We gotta go find those guys now. And maybe the Brigand Dareth are now avoiding them at all costs. How are your players going to get that? Maybe through the course of their investigation, they somehow end up at the Sea Maiden's Fair. They talk to Jarlaxle in disguise, and Jarlaxle, or in this case Zardoz Zord, says, hey, I'll fix you up with what you need, but of course there's something that I need from you. So don't just leave it up to just rolling some dice to get these items. That's boring. Have an adventure. There should be an entire thing that your players need to do in order to get this vault open, because as mentioned in previous videos, the more gold that they have to spend opening up this place means that their profit margins are going down, but it's always going to be worth it, right? If they spend a few thousand gold greasing hands right here trying to find anything, for example being an adamantine bar, then that will have been worth it if they were to get all 500,000 gold. Of course, the more people that interact with the PCs going to the Vault of Dragons, the less gold they're going to get in the end. And we'll see at the end of this that there's a very good chance that your players could walk away with nothing. Now with all 3 keys in the possession of the players, they open the door, and there inside they'll get to what they're trying to get after. Some important things to know about the vault is you cannot teleport into it. Obviously, people would have just gotten in here, right, if you could just teleport in there. So no teleportation magic in or out. Very important. The walls are made of mortared stone, and except in Area 9, there are no light sources, so people got to be busting out the torches and lights. Now, something important to note is when your players go to that door, of course it says the 3 keys, bring them forth, and of course it's got the laundry list of things there. They open up the door, there's seemingly no way to close it. When your players walk in here, they'll maybe try and close it behind them because they want to make sure that they're safe or whatever, but they actually can't do it. The only way you can close this door is by yelling out the word Azam, which theoretically your players aren't going to know, right? If they do know, then they're probably cheating. In Area 2, we have the entrance foyer. As your players walk through here, they should see that this place is old, decrepit, and high above there are some walkways, but they'll have to find how to climb up it. Whether they try and climb up it right here, or if they start searching around this place, they'll finally find how to actually walk straight up there. Now, all around this location, there are these sets of double doors, which are totally fake, but of course, after they spend a decent amount of time searching for it, they can easily just discover that they are located up here in the northwest. In Area 3, we have these stairs in fresco. As your players walk in here, they're undoubtedly going to see an enthralling fresco. When they see it, they need to make a DC 12 wisdom saving throw or be charmed for 24 hours. If they are charmed in this way, they are going to protect that fresco with their lives, and they are going to refuse to move away from it. Of course, if half of the party gets stuck in this way, charmed in this way, that's really bad because now everyone just sat there and is just going to be sucking. Your players could think to themselves, okay, that fresco is obviously charming them and they don't want to leave, let's attack it. And then inevitably combat's going to ensue. And that's really bad because if the players are beating up on each other, then who knows what's going to happen, right? And destroying it, mind you, could be pretty hard, not only because they have to overcome their allies, but also because the thing has an AC of 17 with 25 HP. So if you have a whole bunch of people in the party get enamored in this way, and only one person, let's say, is able to not get enthralled, that's really bad. It's more than likely if you have only one PC, they're not going to overpower 3 other PCs. So hopefully everybody is able to pull through with this saving throw. But if even one person does, that one person is probably going to have to get beat up or restrained or whatever. Hopefully your players are smart and don't resort to full-on PvP. Hopefully the people that are not charmed in this way are going to come up with some clever way to somehow knock out the other PCs, to put them to sleep, to try and create an opening to destroy the fresco any way they can to make sure that their friends are safe and sound. In Area 4, we have the Hall of Moradin. As your players walk through here, they can see there is some nice little paintings and stuff on the side, and they'll also see that there is all those stone bridges. Interesting to note is if your players start looking around the walls and see that there's a crumbly bit, if they poke around for too long, then a black pudding is going to creep out from the wall and start attacking. And that's really bad because black puddings can easily kill PCs and also, very important, damage equipment. No one likes their equipment damaged. If players are perceptive enough, then they will be able to see that there is a secret door to the south there. Opening this thing up will lead to a secret room, which will lead to some pretty cool loot. The interesting thing to note is there's a lot of dwarven architecture and scheme going on here. If there is any PC that is a dwarf, that they are rewarded in being able to spot things more easy and things open up for them, which is pretty cool. Now, these stone bridges are crumbling and they are scary. The bridges that connect all of the Area 4 to Areas 6, 7, and 8 are not to be treaded unlightly. Either bridge collapses if more than 150 pounds of weight is applied to it, and creatures standing on a section of the bridge when it collapses must first succeed a DC 15 dexterity saving throw or fall 60 feet to the floor below, which means you take 6d6 points of damage, which is not a fun time. And also important to note is that middle bridge there is a gap. In order to get over that gap, anybody trying to jump over will have to make a DC 15 dexterity saving throw, as when they hop over, then another portion of it collapses, and if they fail, then of course they fall, taking the 6d6 points of damage. So right there, the fact that this thing can only support 150 pounds of weight is already going to exclude a lot of player characters. And there is a lot of people who make a lot of heavy people and they carry a ton of gear. And if you have a big hulking individual wearing a ton of gear, then they're going to weigh easily more than 150 pounds. In fact, it's actually very likely that a lot of normal characters are going to be weighing more than that. So that is a very big concern. How are people that weigh more going to get over this hump? There's, of course, a lot of creative things that they could do. They could try and fasten a rope to the other side and scooch along it. They could, instead of walking on the stone platforms themselves, they could, of course, try and scale it. There is just a ton of things they can do. And I say reward creativity, but make them work for it. In Area 6, we have the Hammer and Anvil. If your players make their way inside of here after succeeding on a DC 21 athletics check or using a knock or similar magic, they can find that there is a hammer and anvil in here. And if they start looking around the place hard enough and they deduce several inklings, then they could take that hammer and hit the anvil, and everybody around is going to gain 10 temporary HP, which they probably will sorely need considering what is going to happen later on. In Area 7, we have Dumathoin's Secret. After your players make their way inside of here, they will see that Dwarven runes on the far wall read out, "A secret never before told will part Dumathoin's lips." And that is, of course, saying, hey, reveal a secret and something's going to happen. This is, once again, a really fun roleplay scenario of if you have a PC in there, then they have to say a secret out loud that's never been told before, and then the doors will open, and that's going to lead them to the Vault of Dragons. In Area 8, we have Old Fire Eyes, and this is just a mean old trap. Your players can go here, and they're more than likely to come here first because it is the first thing they come across, right? And your players make their way inside of there, and they will see that this place is just a mean old trap. The trapdoor is false and can't be lifted, but anyone who tries to open up the false door in here immediately has to make a DC 18 dexterity saving throw or be struck by magical fire, taking 4d10 points of fire damage. Pretty gnarly stuff. That is just a big ol' FU, that's just a middle finger, and that's just not a fun time. But once again, hopefully they are going to have resources to spare here because they're going to need everything they can get. And finally, in Area 9, we have the main vault. Your players crawl all the way through here after everything they've done in the city of Waterdeep against all of their rival factions, against all those NPCs that have gotten in their way, and they finally get here to this vault. And when they turn around and see all the piles of loot, there is also someone else waiting here. A dwarf. A gold dwarf. But the thing is that dwarf is going to turn around and declare themselves to be Bayrock Klanghammer. But of course, they are not a dwarf. They are a dragon. Now comes an extremely pivotal portion of this campaign. How do your players react when they see all of the gold waiting right here? This is more gold than they've ever seen in their entire lives. 500,000 gold just waiting to be picked up. They are going to see that the only thing standing in their way is a dwarf. You may have some people who decide, hey, let's get rid of this guy and let's get this gold. You could have some people who say, let's, negotiate. Let's see what's going on here. You can have so many different things here. Of course, you're going to know your players best, and it's going to be entirely different depending on your play. But, oh my goodness, the variety of ways that this encounter will go down is immense. The important thing to consider here is the fact that Aronnax is not an evil dragon. Aronnax is not going to simply turn around and start roasting the PCs. But, of course, if the PCs attack, then Aronnax is going to defend himself, of course. Now, throughout this entire list here, we get a whole bunch of instances on how your players may choose to roleplay this out, whether they try to persuade Aronnax that the money is stolen, or maybe your players try and say that Lord Neverember actually told us to get this gold. There's just so many different ways they can handle it, and I highly suggest you give this a read and reread. But what I'm going to tell you is, no matter how many dice are rolled, it's not going to matter as much, because what really comes down to your players walking away with all this gold is what happens in the scene after this. Something important to note here is, if your players are totally successful in talking to this individual and say, yeah, let's get this gold, there's no way your players are going to be able to walk out with all this gold. It is 10,000 pounds worth of gold. They simply cannot walk away with it. Even if they had, a bag of holding, that's still not enough. They would need several bags of holding. In fact, heck if I know, I'd have to look at it. But bags of holding would not be able to carry all of this in one go. So your players are going to have to make repeat trips here, unless they've got a bejesus ton of NPCs and bags of holding, I guess. This is going to be a long time in the making. So while, yes, the roleplay here is extremely important, what I'm going to say is if combat breaks out, then I say let loose. If you have people that are greedy and just immediately try and strike down this dwarf to get all this gold, then just have it played out where if someone tries to stab this dwarf, Then that blade barely pierces the dwarf's flesh, and then all of a sudden he expands out to being the full dragon that he is. And then your players are going to start booking it. There's of course a ton of fun combats you could be having in here where the dragon is looming around and firing off its breath and your players are ducking in between all the pillars and columns here. There is a ton of fun things to be had with that. But of course, statistically, a level 4 or level 5 group, even higher level groups, are not going to be able to take on this dragon. It's just not going to happen. But as mentioned before, the leaving of the vault is another extremely important aspect here. Who have your players pissed off and who have your players made friends with? That is going to dictate the outcome of this adventure. As your players try and leave the location, then some goons are going to show up, and that's really bad. And not only are the goons going to show up, but guess what? Everyone that knows about what's going on here is going to join in on the fray. If your players had made friends or enemies of all of these factions, then bring them in. Have this be an absolute clown fiesta. Have this be a truly memorable last stand. Have this be a climactic finish. As your players are trying to grab all of this gold, how the heck are they going to get out of here? How many allies are they bringing to the table, and how many people are coming to kill them? And mind you, this list here, this faction reinforcement list, this is only covering the mainstay factions. What about all the NPCs that your players have come to know and love throughout the entirety of the campaign? Those people could be showing up too, right? If anybody has any inkling on how they could possibly get here, or if your players have been followed this whole time, then of course there's going to be people waiting in the shadows. And I say, have at it. Don't just limit yourself to having them all funnel through that single door. Maybe some people fall directly behind the PCs and are waiting there in the main foyer. Maybe some people fall right down here to this Vault of Dragons itself. Maybe some people are waiting outside on the street. You know, just to spread out all these things as much as you want. Have them be all together as much as you want. But make sure that your players are going to have a rip-roaring great time of it. For the adventure conclusion, we get the very most dire one out of the way, dying in the vault. If your players show up to the Vault of Dragons and fight Aronnax, and Aronnax bakes them alive and then closes the door, then guess what? No one's ever getting to the Vault of Dragons ever again, because the Stone of Galore is just sitting in here. That's the end of story. But of course, we move on to the fun things like removing the gold. As mentioned before, it's just not possible for, just a handful of PCs to walk away with the gold. People are going to notice. It's going to take multiple trips. And also, very importantly, is if the PCs are the ones to somehow get all of the gold, then of course people are going to start banging on their doors and start asking for some handouts, right? We get this nice little list here on what's going to happen. Laeral Silverhand is going to immediately demand that she gets almost all of the gold, and the players get a measly sum of only 50,000. Davos Starsong is going to ask for some donations. Volo is going to ask for some donations. Just this nice list here. And that's real, right? In the real world, when people win the lottery, everybody who knows them is going to start, begging them for money, which sucks, but, that's just the nature of it. But the important thing to note is your players may not walk away with all 500,000 gold. Depending on the deals that they have struck with all the other factions, they may say, hey, we're going to work with Jarlaxle and his crew, and Jarlaxle is going to take a solid 4/5 of it, and we're only going to get 1/5 of it, and we're going to walk away easy peasy. That's perfectly fair, that's perfectly fine. Maybe your players make double deals and even backstabs and all that fun stuff. Maybe your players actually pit all of the other factions against each other and try to make out themselves. There's just a lot of ways that this can shake out. And that's what I love about this adventure. It's so self-contained, and yet there's just so much variety to how your players interact with all these factions. Make sure that you don't stifle that creativity and imagination. Make sure that whatever happens with all the faction interplay here, that your players are able to walk away with something at least. Even if your players aren't able to walk away with even a single gold from the Vault of Dragons, at least make them a great experience that they'll cherish forever. And lastly here we get onward and downward. Once your players have finished this campaign, then lo and behold, they are introduced and teased with going to Undermountain. They're obviously just trying to sell their own product here of Dungeon of the Mad Mage, but hey, I'm okay with them trying to peddle their own books, because you don't need to. Obviously, if your player characters have gotten a bejesus ton of gold, why would rich people then subject themselves to going down into a dangerous dungeon? That's beyond me, but maybe there's some foolhardy adventurers that just love to adventure. So some things I strongly recommend here for this epic conclusion, this finale of your players diving into the Vault of Dragons is have that checklist ready to go. See how your players have animosity or love for all of the factions. How are the other factions working with or against each other? Make sure that you have this nice little diagram here on how that is going to work. Because once everything starts going haywire, your players are going to immediately, work with everybody that they are friends with, right? Or they're going to start backstabbing people. You're already going to know what they're going to do, right? You already know, they've already said it out loud. Oh, we plan on doing this, or we're going to work against them, whatever. So you're going to know. Just make sure that you play into what's going on. Make sure all those factions are entertaining, engaging, and make sure that the fight for the 500,000 gold is a spectacular one. This adventure is called Waterdeep Dragon Heist, and it certainly has Waterdeep, and it certainly has dragons in it. But does it have a heist? Not in the sense that we all know this is not an Ocean's 11 heist, but you can of course do a lot of things with that. You can of course run the Alexandrian remix, or you could just say that one of the other factions gets all of the 500,000 gold and you got to steal it from one of those factions. That's obviously just another thing you can do. But of course, this is D&D. You don't need to live up to the normal expectations. Make sure you subvert expectations at every chance that you can get. That was the end of chapter 4 here, but guess what? There is many more chapters in here detailing out all of the other factions, and we're going to be diving into those very soon. So go ahead and tell me, did this Vault of Dragons live up to your expectations, or did you want it to be more of a heist? Do you think that your players are going to try and jump Aronnax, or do you think your players are going to be cordial? And most important of all, what about those factions? How many factions know about the gold? How many factions are friends with the players? And more importantly, how many factions are enemies of the players? Go ahead and tell me all those things because I want to know. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you for watching. Thanks for listening. And thank you to my amazing patrons. You guys are absolutely incredible. Thank you so very much. And I cannot wait to see you all in the next one.